Hi guys, I'm Sadar and I'm back with another video. And today we are going to talk about 5 more things to remember for your next site analysis. This is the second video in the site analysis series, and if you have not watched the first video yet, I recommend you to go and watch that video first. And if you have already watched it, let's get started with this one. Today we have 5 fresh things to talk about, starting with the first one, that's services and utilities. I got few responses in my last video that I had missed this point, but I was actually saving it for this video. So when we talk about services and utilities, it covers a wide range of things, starting with water supply, electrical supply, waste management, cooking gas supply, etc. It's always better to note the present or the future locations of these services in your site during the site analysis phase, so that your design process can react to the locations. For this, you might have to refer to the local municipal documents, or it's sometimes easy to just talk with the neighbors and ask them where the location of these services are in your site. In most of the countries, these services are provided by government authorities. However, in some of the countries, there are also private companies that also provide the services and utilities to the customers, and you might have to check with your client which company they prefer before you can proceed. Once you have the present location or possible future location of all of these services in your site, you might want to take your site plan and note all of these down so that you can refer it later during your design process. So second point today is legal information. In all of the countries, building design and construction is guided by a set of rules and regulations, and these are implemented using building codes and bylaws. And this is the very thing that students find overwhelming when they come to the professional field. And I must admit, it's something that we professionals also struggle with sometimes. And this is the reason why collecting and understanding your building bylaws for your site is important during the site analysis phase itself. There are few things in these building bylaws that are tied closely with your site. There are points like site coverage, setbacks, and building height restrictions that you might want to know during your site analysis phase. While there are separate building codes for architects, structural engineers, electrical engineers, plumbers, a smart architect has a knowledge of all of these codes, and this helps to make the design process more efficient. The third point today is sensory data. If you are an architect or an architecture student, you already know that architecture is much more than what meets the eye. Your site might have many things going on in and around it, which might have a positive or a negative impact on the sensory experience of your user. It's very important for an architect to recognize all of these features and react to them correctly during the design process. I'm calling these things sensory data, and these include sound, odor, visual connections, and comfort in general. When we talk about sound, it can be sound that you would want to celebrate in your design. For example, there could be a river flowing beside your site, and you would want to include that sound in the experience in your design. Or it can be sounds that you would want to avoid, like sound of traffic nearby, or maybe a plane flying by above your site. I remember in one of my sites, we had this interesting flower that used to give this really nice smell during the evening time. And during my site visit, I recognized this flower, and it became a part of my design process later on. You could have something similar in your site, or sometimes there can be an odor that you would want to avoid, like maybe there's a dumping site nearby your site. Now, when we talk about visual connections, it includes views that you can see from your site or the views towards your site. You might have $1 million view that you would want to frame from a specific point, or you might want to take a note on how your site looks from a specific point on the road, or maybe a vantage point somewhere around your site. Now, moving on to the fourth point, that's culture. Whatever our project might be, our design is going to exist in this cultural fabric of the site that we are given. And that's the reason why we need to be really careful about the local culture right from the site analysis phase. Now, culture basically means the way of living, and in architecture, culture influences a wide range of things, starting with spatial planning, material or color palette, and also landscape design. For an architect, the best reference for understanding the culture is to look at the vernacular architecture. When you explore the local vernacular architecture, you get to understand how locals have been dealing with the spatial planning in their houses, what materials do they prefer, and most of the times these materials are way cheaper and readily available around your site. And finally, you can understand what kind of landscape elements like trees or grass survive with minimum effort. The fifth and final thing for today is history and future of the site. So we have already discussed about taking the note of 3 different dimensions of your site through measurement in our first video. Now this point covers the 4th dimension, and that's time. By this, I mean to study the history and the future of your site during your site analysis phase. For history, you might use different methods like interview or satellite images like I have discussed in my previous video to understand how your site has changed over the years. You can also find out the history of natural disasters that might have occurred in and around your site. These can include floods or earthquake or mudslide, etc. You might also want to know the previous use of your site, because you never know, your site might have been a graveyard or maybe a lake before your client bought the plot. So what do I mean when I say you need to explore the future of your site? You might say that we are architects and not fortune tellers, but let me tell you that we have researches and planning documents as our crystal ball where we can see the future of our site. When you research, you might find planning documents of the city that your site exists on, and it can tell you a lot about how the neighborhood is going to change. And you might also want to consider the change in the pattern of rainfall and temperature in the city that your site exists on. So yes, these were the 5 advanced things that you would want to consider for your next site analysis. If you have some more points that you would want me to add on to this list, please comment those down below. And to know more about architecture, make sure to subscribe to my channel.